If I hadn't been the kind of guy who actually reads the fine print, I'd probably be 6 feet under by now, mourned by the woman who tried to kill me. It started like any other Tuesday. The kind of day where nothing stands out, which in hindsight, made it the perfect time for something life-altering to slip through. I had just gotten home from work, my shirt still damp with sweat from the late summer heat, when I saw it, an envelope partially tucked behind a stack of takeout menus. My name was on it, but the return address belonged to our life insurance provider. That alone wasn't unusual. We'd signed up for a joint policy a few years back, right after the wedding. Responsible move, she'd said, and I had agreed. Back then, Megan had a way of making even morbid things sound romantic. If anything ever happens to one of us, the other is protected. Seemed fair. But something about this envelope felt off. The way it was stashed, half hidden like she hadn't meant for me to see it. And when I opened it, what I found wasn't routine. It was a confirmation of recent changes to our coverage. My name was the only one listed. The payout had tripled, 3 times what it used to be. And the signature on the form wasn't mine. At first, I didn't know what to feel. I just stood there, holding the paper, staring at the neat column of numbers. There was no rush of anger, no explosion. Just confusion. I went over the details again and again, trying to convince myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe it was some administrative error. Maybe Megan had meant to talk to me about it. Maybe I'd signed it and forgot. But none of those excuses held water. I'm not the type to forget something like that. And Megan wasn't exactly the proactive one in our relationship. She hadn't worked in over a year, always had some new reason why it wasn't the right time, her stomach, her mood, the weather, a dream she had about being hit by a car. I'd been carrying most of the weight and making peace with it, telling myself she'd find her footing again. That's what marriage is, right? Pushing through the dips together. Except now I was staring at a policy that had been changed without my knowledge. A policy that would pay out a very generous amount if something suddenly happened to me. That was when the dread started. A slow, tightening grip around my ribs. I set the paper down and walked around the kitchen like that would help me think better. But every corner of that house felt different now. I could still smell the cinnamon scent she always sprayed before I got home. There was a half-eaten bowl of cereal in the sink, the kind she only ate when she was feeling lazy. Her phone was charging on the counter, a wallpaper of us smiling at the Grand Canyon 6 years ago. But everything about it felt staged. Like I was in a scene I didn't realize I was playing a part in. I checked the drawer where we kept the important stuff, passports, tax documents, the original life insurance paperwork. Hers was untouched. Still the same payout, the same terms. Only mine had been altered. I flipped through the pages of old bills, credit card statements, anything that might show a pattern. And that's when I realized this wasn't new. She had been making changes, little ones, for months. Things I hadn't noticed. The auto payment to the insurance company had quietly increased. The paper trail was there, clear as day, if you knew where to look. And she had counted on me never looking. The scariest part wasn't that she might have lied. It was how meticulous she had been. She hadn't just increased the policy, she'd timed it right after my annual physical. The one where my blood pressure had been perfect, where the doctor said I was in excellent health. She had waited until I was at my peak before betting against me. I stood in the middle of the living room and realized I had no idea who I was married to. The woman who once cried over a dead bird in the driveway had taken out a kill contract on my life, except instead of hiring someone, she was doing it herself. Slowly. Quietly. Legally. My mind started replaying everything, those odd smoothies she insisted I drink in the mornings. The push for me to eat healthy lately. The sudden obsession with herbal teas, supplements, all under the guise of wellness. It was subtle, almost gentle. Like dying wouldn't even hurt. At night, I had started waking up with cold sweats. I thought it was stress. But now I wasn't sure. I sat down and stared at the photo on the mantel, us, laughing on our wedding day. She looked happy. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with. And maybe, at one point, she had been. But that woman was long gone. In her place was someone strategic. Cold. Someone who had mapped out how to benefit most from my death. And still had the nerve to kiss me goodnight. My skin crawled. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she did it out of fear. Maybe she thought she was protecting herself. Maybe she meant to talk to me, and things just spiraled. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't panic. This was planning. She was never going to say anything. And if I hadn't opened that mail? If I had just tossed it into the recycling bin like I usually did? She'd still be smiling at me across the dinner table, stirring poison into my tea. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside her, my back turned, listening to her breathing. Wondering if the next morning's breakfast was already in the fridge. Wondering if I'd make it to next week. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. That came later. First came the realization that the woman I married was capable of ending me, and doing it in a way that looked like love. Ryan knew better than to go storming in with accusations. If she was bold enough to rewrite their life insurance without telling him, then she was careful enough to cover her tracks. So he said nothing. Just smiled when she smiled. Ate what she cooked. Kissed her cheek when he left for work. But underneath it all, he was building a case, quietly, methodically, the same way she had built hers. He started with the bank statements. Megan had always hated logging into the financial accounts, so they shared a folder where everything auto-synced. She probably forgot that. It didn't take long before the trail became obvious. A few payments here and there to online vendors with vague names. Organic markets. Herbal supplement websites. One transaction from 2 months ago to a company that sold essential oils touted to induce deep sleep. Another, more recent, for a rare plant extract known to be toxic in the wrong doses. He checked their shared laptop next. That took a little finesse. Megan had her own user profile. She wasn't tech-savvy enough to realize that even when she used incognito mode, the search history could still be traced through system logs and cached files. It was all there. The keywords made his skin crawl. Common poisons undetectable in autopsy. How much melatonin is too much? Life insurance claim process after spouse dies at home. What plants are toxic to humans but not pets? There was no mistaking it anymore. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a cry for help or a financial safety net. It was a plan. And the scariest part? It was unfolding right under his nose. She had started cooking more, something he used to wish for. Now it terrified him. Soups appeared on the stove with ingredients he didn't recognize. There were fresh smoothies every morning, always in tall glasses she poured herself last. She began insisting he take supplements to help with your stress, and gave him a bedtime tea so fragrant it burned the inside of his nostrils. And always, she watched him drink. Not eagerly. Just, patiently. He played along. Took smaller sips. Dumped leftovers when she wasn't looking. But even then, doubt crept in. Had she already tried? Was he too late? That migraine that laid him out last weekend, was it really from work stress? Or was it the beginning of her slow burn? It changed the way he looked at everything. The home they had built together, once a safe space, became a maze of silent traps. His toothbrush, his vitamins, even the laundry detergent, nothing felt innocent. He stopped letting her pour his drinks. Started taking photos of the bottles she opened. Sometimes he pretended to be clumsy just to spill a glass and watch her reaction. She never got mad. That scared him more. The intimacy they once had, warm and familiar, became something else entirely. Every time she touched his arm, he wondered if it was to check his pulse. Every kiss felt like a countdown. Her hands, once comforting, now felt like they were measuring him for a coffin. He couldn't sleep. Not really. He'd doze off in spurts, never fully resting. His body wouldn't let him. Too much uncertainty. Too much danger between the sheets. It was like living in a haunted house, except the ghost was alive, beautiful, and humming in the kitchen while plotting his funeral. And then, the whispering started. It wasn't obvious at first. She'd take calls in the bedroom, but always with the door half closed. Sometimes she'd lower her voice or step into the hallway. He chalked it up to personal space, until the night he pretended to nap on the couch. The TV was on mute. His eyes closed just enough to seem relaxed, his chest rising and falling with a calm rhythm he had learned from years of high school theater. Megan tiptoed into the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Her laugh, once a melody to him, sounded sharp and conspiratorial now. He couldn't make out every word, but the ones that came through were enough to rip the floor out from under him. She was talking about him. Not lovingly. Not even with annoyance. She sounded amused. Like his life, his presence, was just a waiting game. The phrase that stuck with him, burned into his brain like a brand, was so casual it almost didn't register at first. How much longer he has to play husband. Play husband. The words echoed in his skull long after she hung up. That night, he didn't sleep at all. He didn't even lie down. He sat at the edge of the guest bed, staring at the blank wall, piecing it together. She had moved from deception into detachment. It was like he had already died in her mind. Like she was just biding time, counting days until it became official. Until the money was hers. And she was laughing about it. The next morning, she offered him a smoothie. He smiled, took it, and waited until she went upstairs before pouring it down the sink. His hands shook as he washed the glass and put it back exactly where it had been. This was the moment it stopped being about suspicion. Now, it was survival. He started backing up everything. Screenshots. Photos. Printed out documents and tucked them in a manila folder beneath the spare tire in his trunk. He bought a small voice recorder and started keeping it in his coat pocket. Every word she said was potential evidence now. What scared him most wasn't that she might succeed. It was how close she had already come. He thought about the vows they had exchanged. The promises. The plans they made. Then he thought about her whispering to someone else about the timeline of his life like it was an inconvenience. He knew now. There was no saving this. No conversation to be had. This wasn't about a broken relationship. It was about staying alive. By the time Ryan pulled into the police station, his hands didn't shake anymore. He'd rehearsed what he was going to say for weeks in the dark silence of his garage, sitting in the driver's seat long after the engine had cooled. He walked in with a thick binder tucked under his arm and a calmness that wasn't really calm, more like the numb steadiness of someone who had finally accepted that their life wasn't what they thought it was. He laid everything out. The financial records. The internet history. Photos of meals, printouts of transactions, timestamps from her browser. He told them about the life insurance change. About the phone call he overheard. About the smoothies, the teas, the sudden push for wellness that no one asked for. He expected doubt, some hesitation, maybe a polite nod and a promise to look into it. But what he got instead was focus. Quiet, professional concern. And that's when it all shifted. The police took it seriously. Very seriously. They asked for a copy of the policy, which he provided. They reviewed his evidence in silence. Then they made a few calls, and by the end of the hour, the insurance company was looped in too. Apparently, Ryan's file had already raised a few eyebrows on their end. A sudden increase in coverage. Only on one partner. Signed digitally, but with no verification trail from his IP address. The red flags were already stacking up. That's when the officers laid it out for him. They told him to play along. Keep his routine. Don't change anything. Let her think he was still oblivious. The more confident she got, the sloppier she'd become. And that's what they needed. He walked out of the station into the cold air, not feeling relief exactly, but something close. He wasn't alone in this anymore. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't paranoid. What he suspected was real. And now, someone else knew it too. The next morning, Megan announced she was going on a solo spa weekend. Said she needed to clear her head. Left him with a list of groceries and a half-hearted kiss. Her bag was already packed. No real explanation. No invitation for him to join. Ryan said nothing. He nodded, smiled like a good husband should, and watched her drive off. What she didn't know was that she wasn't just being watched by him anymore. It didn't take long for the police to figure out where she was really going. There was no spa reservation under her name anywhere in the state. Instead, she had booked a rental property under an alias, a small cottage 2 hours away. Private. Secluded. The perfect place to plan, or celebrate. And she wasn't going alone. Brad. That was the name that came up. A man with a record that stretched across 3 states. Fraud. Identity theft. A couple of sealed cases that didn't stay sealed once law enforcement started digging. The kind of guy who could charm his way into anyone's life, and help them out of one, too. Brad was already on the police's radar before Megan's case came in. But now, with the dots connected, he became something more than a side character. He was her partner. And not just romantically. He was the one helping her plan the exit. The one who'd probably coached her on how to file the paperwork. Maybe even helped her pick the method. It made Ryan sick to think about how many late nights she had spent whispering on the phone, planning his slow, invisible death, while Brad told her how to get away with it. That weekend, the police kept watch from a distance. Ryan received quiet updates through a secure channel. She and Brad went to a small lake town. No spa treatments. No relaxation. Just late-night conversations on the porch of their rental, long drives with no particular destination, and one very suspicious visit to a hardware store where they bought several containers of a chemical compound that, when combined with the right herbal mix, could mimic a natural heart failure. She was getting ready. But so was Ryan. The fear was gone now. The nausea, the sleeplessness, the dread that once kept him frozen, replaced by a quiet, humming resolve. She had chosen her path. He had given her every chance to be honest, to step back from the edge. Instead, she had wrapped herself in her lies like armor. Smiling. Cooking. Touching him with those same hands that were helping to plan his funeral. That kind of betrayal doesn't just shatter trust, it burns through your identity. It remaps your idea of safety, love, even memory. He started to question everything. Every, I love you. Every birthday surprise. Every lazy Sunday morning where she'd lay her head on his chest. How long had it all been fake? When did she decide he was worth more to her dead than alive? And yet, despite everything, he didn't want revenge for the sake of it. He didn't want to explode, scream, or throw her out. That would have given her the drama she could spin into sympathy. He didn't need vengeance. He needed truth. Cold. Documented. Undeniable. So he let her move closer to the finish line. Let her lace the drinks. Let her set the table. Let her believe that soon, it would all be hers. He had started sleeping in short bursts again, but only during the day. Nights were for preparation, backing up files, storing extra evidence, documenting timestamps. Every hour she spent thinking she had outsmarted him, he spent double, sharpening the noose she was tying for herself. He didn't hate her. That was the strangest part. He pitied her. Somewhere along the way, Megan had convinced herself that this was logical. That love had an expiration date, and life was a negotiation. She didn't just want to leave, she wanted to gain. She wanted the house, the money, the sympathy, the new man. But she didn't want the fallout. So she tried to erase him. But Ryan wasn't going to disappear. Not quietly. Not conveniently. She thought she had control. She thought he was still the man sipping her smoothies and smiling through poison. But he wasn't sipping anymore. He was watching. And she was almost out of time. The night she made her move was almost poetic in how normal it seemed. Megan lit candles. Played soft music. Set the table with care, like it was some kind of celebration. Maybe it was, for her. Ryan watched her from across the table, taking in the delicate flick of her wrist as she poured his drink. She smiled, sweet as ever. It was cranberry juice, or so she said. Organic, of course. Mixed with something to help him sleep better. He watched the liquid swirl in the glass, then raised it to his lips with a calmness that was almost eerie. The room was quiet. The walls felt closer. Outside, beyond the soft edges of suburban calm, unmarked cars waited, tucked into the shadows of the neighborhood. Cameras were hidden in plain sight. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway, every angle was covered. The agents had wired the place earlier in the day while Megan was out. Every word, every action, every drop poured, it was all being recorded. Ryan had rehearsed his part. He sipped just enough to convince her. Then he excused himself, feigning exhaustion. Her eyes gleamed in the candlelight. She probably thought she had done it, finally found the dosage that wouldn't arouse suspicion. That in a few hours, she'd wake to a lifeless body and a house filled with panic and sirens. She would cry. Call 911. Play the grieving widow. Start the process of collecting her reward. That was the plan. Except it wasn't hers anymore. Ryan followed the instructions the officers had given him. As soon as he got to the guest room, he triggered the emergency protocol. Within minutes, medical personnel, already on standby, entered the home under the cover of night, whisked him away in silence. Megan never heard a thing. By the time she peeked into the bedroom hours later, the bed was empty, the window slightly ajar. Panic must have set in right then. But instead of calling anyone, she did something even bolder. She went straight to the insurance office. That very night. She arrived before dawn, breathless and wild-eyed. Told the front desk associate that she needed to speak with someone immediately. Her husband had collapsed. She hadn't wanted to believe it, but when she checked on him, he was cold, unresponsive. She cried. Sobbed, even. Talked about how they had just celebrated an anniversary. How he had seemed a little off but brushed it aside. She told the story like she had practiced it in front of a mirror. What she didn't know was that the entire office had been briefed the day before. So they played along. She was ushered into a private room. Offered a cup of coffee. Tissues. Sympathy. She accepted it all without hesitation. Even smiled between tears. She thought she had pulled it off. But the smile didn't last. Because just before she could sign anything, the door opened. Two detectives stepped inside, badges visible, expressions unreadable. Her posture stiffened. She glanced between them, confusion beginning to cloud her carefully curated grief. She stammered something, tried to compose herself. One of the detectives pulled out a folder. Thick. Worn at the edges. Inside were printouts, photos, documents, every damning piece of the plan she had stitched together over months. They told her what they had. What they'd seen. What she'd done. The moment hit her like a wave crashing through glass. The tears dried instantly. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Just a stunned silence as she stared down at her carefully constructed world being ripped apart one page at a time. Fraud. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. The words echoed through the room, each one cutting deeper than the last. Her hands trembled. Her legs buckled slightly beneath her, and for the first time in what was probably months, the mask slipped. There was no poised, calculating woman anymore. Just a cornered liar drowning in the weight of her own decisions. Ryan didn't witness the moment in person, but the footage was enough. The detective shared it with him later, and he watched it alone in a quiet office, the flickering surveillance feed capturing every expression, every failed denial, every attempt at bargaining. She had nothing left to offer. Not after what she had done. She looked small. Not weak, just exposed. Like the truth had finally peeled back the layers she'd hidden behind. And it wasn't anger Ryan felt. It wasn't even triumph. It was closure. He had handed her the rope. Given her every opportunity to stop. But she hadn't. She walked right into it, all on her own. His revenge hadn't come through shouting or violence. It came through precision. Patience. He let her hang herself with her own plan. And the world got to watch it unravel. The betrayal had been personal. Intimate. She had held his life in her hands and decided it was expendable. So the justice had to be personal too. Clean. Legal. Unmistakable. As she was led out of the insurance office in handcuffs, Ryan got the message. One of the officers texted him a single line and a photo, Megan, caught mid-turn, eyes wide in disbelief as the cuffs clicked shut behind her. It was over. She was going away for a long time. The house was quiet that night. Still. For the first time in weeks, Ryan slept through the night. No dreams. No tossing. No waking up wondering if that sip of tea had been the one to end him. Just silence. Real silence. And in that silence, he found peace, not just from her, but from the weight of what she had tried to do. She had built a story where he died and she lived happily ever after. But the truth rewrote the ending. And this time, the villain didn't get away with it. The arrests made the evening news. Megan's mugshot was the kind that froze people mid-bite. That expression, somewhere between disbelief and humiliation, was splashed across every screen in the county. Brad's photo followed shortly after, less surprising somehow, like he belonged in that space. His smirk didn't last long. By the time the police finished connecting the dots, he wasn't just complicit, he was deeply embedded in multiple schemes, including Megan's. The charges stuck. Fraud. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Tampering with evidence. It piled up faster than either of them could spin it. The case was airtight, thanks to the trail Ryan had built, piece by methodical piece. The insurance company wasted no time. Her policy was voided. The attempted payout froze her out of anything tied to Ryan, and a formal report was filed with the state's fraud division. It was no longer a domestic mess, it was a federal problem. What she'd set in motion had snowballed beyond her understanding. She thought she was playing the long game. In reality, she was walking straight into a trap she couldn't talk her way out of. Word spread quickly. At first, it was whispers, nervous conversations between neighbors during morning jogs or grocery store runs. But when the full story surfaced, when the timeline and intentions were made public, everything changed. The same people who once smiled at Megan's yard parties, who said Ryan was too quiet, too serious, those people now crossed the street to speak to him. Some came bearing apologies. Others, casseroles. Embarrassed by their own gullibility, as if they'd been complicit by believing her. Her family, once cold and distant toward Ryan, reached out too. They said they didn't see it coming. That they never imagined Megan was capable of such darkness. Some admitted they'd thought Ryan was boring, disconnected. Now they said he had been composed. Stable. The kind of man you'd want beside you in a crisis, exactly what Megan had tried to destroy. But the recognition didn't feel like victory. Not really. Ryan hadn't done this for applause. He stayed in the house just long enough to finish the legal paperwork. Every corner of it whispered of her, paint she picked, furniture she insisted on, framed photos he hadn't had the heart to take down yet. The walls felt heavy, like they'd soaked in too much history. Too many nights spent lying awake, too many mornings sipping tea he didn't trust. So he packed what mattered and left. It wasn't about running away. He needed air. A clean space. A place where the silence wasn't stained by the memory of her voice humming in the kitchen while planning his death. The apartment he chose was modest. Minimalist. No shared closets, no his and hers anything. Just one toothbrush, one coffee mug, one bed. But it was his. Entirely. No secrets in the drawers, no poison in the pantry. Just peace. That was what surprised him most, how quiet could feel good again. He started waking up without that weight on his chest. No rehearsed responses. No glancing over his shoulder. His body, once tense by habit, started to relax. Even the air felt different. As if he was finally exhaling after months of holding his breath. In that space, away from the noise, Ryan began to unpack what had really happened, not just the facts, but the why. She hadn't just wanted to end things. She wanted to end him and walk away richer for it. That was what made it unforgivable. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't boredom. It wasn't even hate. It was calculation. She saw him not as a person to be divorced, but as an asset to be liquidated. That realization was the hardest. Because it meant none of it had been real, not the comfort, the care, the shared dreams. She'd weaponized love. She'd used the familiarity of marriage as a smokescreen. And she would have done it. She would have buried him with clean hands and cried at the service. He didn't believe in revenge for its own sake. That was the thing. He hadn't set out to destroy her. He just wanted the truth. Wanted to survive. But when someone tries to erase you, to profit from your absence, you don't just walk away and let them write the ending. You take the pen back. You let them cash out, and go straight to jail. The final court proceedings didn't take long. Megan pled out, hoping for leniency. She wouldn't get it. The judge called her actions calculated and cold-blooded. Brad's charges stacked even higher. He'd be away longer. Ryan didn't attend the sentencing. He didn't need to. He already had closure. Instead, he spent that day hiking alone, no phone, no destination. Just miles of trail and the sound of wind moving through trees. And for the first time in what felt like years, he didn't feel watched. Didn't feel hunted. He just existed. The past would always be part of him. That chapter wouldn't disappear. But it didn't define him either. He'd outlived the woman who wanted him gone. And in doing so, he had reclaimed everything, his name, his freedom, his future. And this time, nobody else would write it for him.